Nice. I feel like James Charles every time I put on my lights. Hi sisters, welcome back to the channel. I kind of hated that, but it's okay. Yep, that's me. Hello, my beautiful bookish people. My name is Hannah, and today we're doing a recent read. So, what that means is I'm going to tell you about 5 books, and starting off with one I didn't particularly rate for reasons I'll get into later, and then ending with a 5-star read. So you get a whole spectrum of reviews from positive to negative, but I like to end on positive because the world's in such a weird place. Why wouldn't we not want to be positive? But moving on to the book I didn't rate for reasons I'll get into, I read my Dark Vanessa, which is about this girl named Vanessa, and she is trying to convince her family to let her go to this prestigious boarding school far away from them when she starts a relationship with one of her teachers. Oh, forgot to mention, she's 13.
Gross. You nasty.
I know. It's a dual timeline from when she's a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, and when she's in her adult life as she's slowly putting the pieces together of her own history with this English teacher as she's kind of coming to terms with her own abuse or sexual abuse that she had as a child. So it's very heavy. Be ready for that, because we start off the book with Vanessa not thinking that these actions were wrong. These pursuits from a very adult English teacher was not wrong because she thinks she wanted it too. But kind of dismantling that and showing the process of what it takes to come to different realizations that some people may need. I don't think you can talk about this book and not bring up conversations or a discussion about Lolita because it handles the same topic matters. It's referenced in the text quite frequently. Vanessa reads Lolita. It's her favorite book. The professor calls Vanessa his Lolita. It's very present in the text. I think that's done purposefully to almost subvert certain ideas about Lolita. If you don't know anything about Lolita, it essentially tackles the same sort of subject matter, but from the male perspective, from Herbie, the 30-year-old who's having to go through this. And the author for Lolita wanted you to feel bad for essentially a pedophile at the end of the story. If he coats this book in beautiful writing and a powerful message about love, he wanted you to feel bad for a pedophile. That's what Lolita was. So if you think about that and you think about my Dark Vanessa almost subverting it, giving us the perspective of Vanessa, the victim, it seems to dismantle this idea that it's not the pedophile's story, it is the victim's story, as it should be, as it almost modernizes it, puts us in Vanessa's head, and sets it in the Me Too movement, which I personally really liked. I've read Lolita, and while it's very beautifully written, I would never recommend it, because personally, I don't think you need to understand the mindset of someone's head like that. I would much rather be in the perspective of a Vanessa, of a Lolita, to understand their process as they're dealing through things. And I think the author does a really beautiful job of putting us in situations but not feeding us the answers or the solution. You're never told how to feel about a situation, which I think is the key in this story. I didn't rate this book is because even though I know the author said specifically that this wasn't a personal story and it wasn't based on anyone, it felt so, I guess, grounded in reality that I felt bad for knocking it down a star for pacing. I was like, it didn't move along like I wanted it. 4 stars. You know, like it felt weird to me to do that. I think it's a hard read, but I think if you can get through it, it's a really powerful read. It invokes perfect balance between letting the reader come to their own conclusion and also having these really hard discussions whilst at the same time subverting Lolita, which I loved. So moving from a almost perfectly balanced book to a book that I think tried to do too much, Going Bovine by Liv. Now, this follows this guy named Cameron who says the last time he was happy was when he was 6 years old in Disney World when he almost drowned. So right from the beginning, you know that Cameron is kind of pessimistic and an idealist. And the other thing you need to know about Cameron is he's a fan of the devil's lettuce, if you know what I mean. And he also has mad cow disease, which is a disease that rapidly declines your mental health and even sometimes puts you in a coma, which is what happens to Cameron. Hallucinations start happening, and that's when our 3-act journey begins with Cameron and his lawn gnome buddy named Gomez try to defeat evil giants. Does that description feel like a fever dream? Well, imagine actually reading it, because it felt like I was smoking the devil's lettuce, you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure this book was supposed to be a satirical look at Don Quixote, only because it's constantly mentioned within the text, and I'm guessing it's supposed to be a sort of modernization of this classic text, but it's conveyed in anger, which is weird, which is valid. I just don't think it particularly aged well. And personally, I just think that this book tried to do too much. It wanted to be a hysteria book about drugs, but it also wanted to be a parody of Don Quixote, but also wanted you to see the personal journey of Cameron as he tried to live life to the fullest. And personally, I don't think this book balanced it well. It was too much, honestly, and I think it's one of the weirdest books that I've ever read. For me, I did not like it. I think I gave it 3 stars. Alright, so the next book that I want to talk about is The Glass Hotel by Emily, which I was super excited about because Emily wrote one of my favorite books of all time called Station 11. And to make a long story short, I was very disappointed. Mostly because I think the description lied to me. The description of this book makes it seem like it's almost going to be magical realism or fabulism set in a modern world with ghosts, and there's a glass hotel, and I was here for that. But let me tell you, it isn't. In fact, it starts out with possibly one of the weirdest points in history, Y2K, where the description kind of hooks you, and it's like, ooh, hey, ghosts, glass hotel, fantastical setting. Psych! I'm actually going to talk about the 2008 financial crisis of the industrial shipping industry. Doesn't that sound like fun? And I guess in the traditional sense, this book kind of has no story, no overarching story. But I think it missed its mark because it never truly dives in to those conversations that it surrounds itself by. Because there were definitely conversations and interesting aspects to the story, but it never talks about them. Paul is dealing with grief as he's also struggling to get over his drug addiction. But do we, talk about that and have analysis of it? No! Vincent, who's named after a poet, leaves her bartending job to be a trophy wife and live a life of luxury. But do we understand her reasonings for that? No! Even the conversation about white-collar crime could be interesting, but we don't talk about it. Which leads me to feel like it's a weird mishmash of stories that kind of correlate, but at the end of the day, don't. It's essentially cats in a book form, because like cats, but does it have an overarching story? Kind of, but that's not why you're there. It just tells you about each cat as we interact with them. In conclusion, The Glass Hotel is actually cats in disguise. Alright, so the next book I want to talk about is You Should See Me in a Crown. I'm sure somebody's already made that joke. I'm sure the title was inspired by that song. But humor me. This is about this girl named Liz, and who's a very bright student, but her scholarship for her college falls through. So she decides to run for prom queen because if you win, they will pay you money in a scholarship form for your school. And then Liz starts to fall for another person who is running for the campaign as well. Whoa, so many hand gestures. Didn't even notice no one's. Okay, I'll stop. I'm 22. I can't do TikTok dances. Now, I think it's hard to do a fluffy contemporary right, but I think this one does it right for two reasons. It also handles heavy conversations and allows you to be with the couple for more than 5 seconds. In most YA contemporaries, I would say the end goal of each book is for the couple to get together. So you get to the end of the book, they're finally together, but we never get to see them as a couple. You Should See Me in a Crown has the couple get together much quicker than I anticipated, but because of that, we get to see them in their couple dynamic, which is almost, I would say, better than the build-up. Also, it's also ingrained in deeper conversations about racism, homophobia, and also trigger warnings for parental loss, and especially if you don't like scenes in a hospital. Put that all together, and you know, you got the best of both worlds. And so, but I ended up really liking and rooting for the main character. I loved her dynamic with her grandparents. I love a good grandma and granddaughter relationship. It speaks to my soul. It's so good that it deserves its own Netflix original movie, but a soundtrack that is also written by Lorde. I'm ready for it. It needs to happen. Alright, now we're on to the discussion of our last book, our 5-star read, which is, a little drum roll please. Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. Give it up! Love you, boo.
Oh my gosh, stop. You're making me blush.
So Middlegame is about this... What is this accent? It's okay, we're gonna keep going with it. It's about these two twins named Roger and Dodger as they kind of circumnavigate time and space in their own timelines of present and past selves. So yes, Roger and Dodger are twins. One leans more on the math side and one leans more on the linguistic side, and they are part of an experiment that should have never worked. They should have died timelines ago. But their twinception is so strong that it allows them to keep working that timeline to figure out how eventually they'll defeat their inevitable evil. Are you confused? Don't worry, Seanan McGuire will explain it better than me. Now, this book reminded me of something. Maybe you would think Frankenstein with its discussion of man versus maker, or maybe Brave New World with the discussions of how possibly technology can go too far. But no, you know what it reminded me of? The Sweet Life on Deck movie.
But when they get caught in a world of weird science and evil twins, you could be the ideal twins to participate. I give you the Gemini Project.
And good news, if you're a fan of twin connection and weird science connections, Middlegame is for you. Middlegame is complex without it ever feeling overwhelming. If you like Sanderson and you want everything explained, Middlegame is not for you. But if you like Victoria Schwab and just liked being in a fantastical world where not everything is explained, Middlegame's for you. It kind of takes the idea of destiny and turns it on its head as it shows characters being able to right their own paths and right their wrongs. But I am being serious. If you wanted a better version of the Sweet Life on Deck movie, Middlegame is really for you.
A healthy reminder that this movie walked so that Peppa could run!
They're overwhelmingly not that similar, but I think the key aspects are there that you're gonna like it. Down to the point where you're confronting your weird scientific creator and dealing them their comeuppance. So that being said, those are all of the books I've read recently that I've wanted to talk to you about. But that kind of concludes this video. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Keep reading and all that jazz. I don't even know if that made sense, but I hope it was a coherent sentence. Cameron and what? Okay, start over. But I think it makes what? If you couldn't tell, that was sarcasm. But I think it makes Converse. What? Well, I burped. After the war, I went back to New York. After the war, I went back to New York. You know what I realized with these lights is I just look paler.